was desperate, at the time I was 17, 18, unemployed, and I was desperate to get a break. And I knew that if I did get a try, I would grab the chance.
I think it was always going to be boxing. The minute I stepped into the gym as a 10 or 11-year-old, boxing just took hold of my heart straight away. I love everything about the sport of boxing.
Hello, I'm Marie Crowe, and this is We Become Heroes, the RTE sport podcast that explores how elite athletes and sports people reach the top of their game and the lessons that they learned along the way. My guest today is three-time major champion and Ryder Cup captain, Pádraig Harrington. Pádraig, thanks so much for coming on. How are you and how busy are you?
Yeah, I'm quite busy because, well, first of all, I'm doing quite well. I'm very, even in these strange times, I'm managing well. In terms of busyness, yeah, I've got the Ryder Cup to organise and what goes with that in terms of my team, but I'm also trying to play as well. So it's kind of, it's 50-50, which is taking up my time, maybe more the Ryder Cup at this stage, but I am still trying to be an active player, which kind of complements a little bit the Ryder Cup. At least I'm out at the events, but I do see the last couple of Ryder Cup captains from Europe were more or less full-time captains. So it's a tough job. It requires a lot of effort to be put into being captain now, much more so than maybe 20 years ago. So yeah, it's a big commitment to try and be a player and a captain at the same time.
Yeah, I'd say it is. Is there a tug at times, where you want to put yourself first, put the team first?
Absolutely. I think that's kind of changed around now in the last couple of months, where it's very much the team first. And I think the hard part for me as a player, I'm usually quite a busy person at golf tournaments. So I'm doing my thing. But as a captain, I have to stop and take the time and spend more time with the players and make sure that I'm doing my captain's duties ahead of my playing duties. So it just means just stepping back a little bit from what I would normally do, maybe not doing quite as much practice as I would do, which isn't a bad thing. So just taking a bigger picture of it really is all that I have to do.
That must be difficult when you're playing well.
Yeah, well, when you play well, you have to do less work. So usually when you're playing well, you don't interfere, you don't do as much practice, you rest up more, and you're certainly not going to the range to try and find it. So if you're playing good golf, what goes on around the golf becomes a lot easier. It's when you're struggling a bit that you tend to actually have to put in more work, and you get caught up in that. So I have been playing well and quite comfortable with my game and my swing. So I haven't had to spend as much time on the range or that, and it frees up time to spend a little bit more time with the players.
Are you getting more comfortable with every part of your game as you get older, and I guess you don't have as much golf in front of you?
Well, golf's a great game that you can keep going, and wherever I'm going to be, I'm trying to be competitive with the young guys still, and I am at times. But if I'm not, I'll move on to the Champions Tour and keep playing. So there's a full schedule of golf ahead of me for years to come, hopefully 30 years to come, not just 10 years. So I intend to be being rolled out when I'm 80 years of age and waving at the crowds and hitting ceremonial shots. So it's one of those things. Golf is a great game that it extends that long. But I want to be competitive. I want to be competitive against young guys. So I work at it hard. I work at my fitness. I try and keep up, and so far I'm doing it. I'd like to play a little bit better on the golf course, but mainly that's mostly mental. As I often say, as you gain experience, you kind of lose a little bit of innocence, and there must be a sweet spot somewhere along the line where you're experienced and you have that naivety and no scar tissue, let's say. And so at some stage you pass that, and it gets a little harder as you get older in that sense. And I think when you've gone past maybe your peak, you're always worried that, you're not worried, I suppose it's the wrong word, but that scar tissue is there, and you always feel a little bit on the edge when it comes to competing. You feel like you can't take many knocks, many mistakes and still win, and that kind of puts you under a bit more pressure. So you're a little bit out of your comfort zone as you maybe pass your peak.
A lot of, or nearly all sports stars and athletes have to deal with retirement, and it often is a really difficult thing to face. You know, people say you often grieve twice if you're a sports star, when you lose somebody or when you have to give up the game that you're in. But technically you don't have to do that. You just can keep going, but you have to deal with aging and things not going the way that you'd like them to go, or the way that they used to go, you know, a decade ago. Or that, is that difficult to cope with?
I really am fascinated watching the other sports stars when they have to give up their sport and retire. And I often see, you know, you might see a soccer player retiring, and I will call it soccer, I'm sorry, but I spend a lot of time in the States, and he might retire at 32 or 33, and you're wondering, well, could he squeeze another 3-4 years out of that, or another year out of it? And, you know, he'll be retired long enough. And it's a constant battle for athletes, because they never look past their sport, or very rarely look past what they're doing in the now. Thankfully, golf, as I said, there's always another level to move on to. As I said, I can move to the Champions Tour now in 6 months' time, and be out there competing against the same people I competed against for the last 25 years and be competitive. So you don't have to retire, but then your priorities change. So you know, the age of your family profile and what's going on. So for a lot of my career, my family would have followed me around. They would have traveled with me and followed my schedule. At this stage, my kids are teenagers, and they don't follow me anymore. They're interested in what they're doing. So the schedule is not set by me anymore, it's set by them. And, you know, so priorities change and things move on. So I do see that in my career, but I don't see, in terms of me being a competitor and you know, playing tournaments, I can go on for a long time, and I'm motivated to do that. I did, by the way, maybe a few years ago, when golf got kind of really hard for me. A few years ago, I would have definitely explored a few different avenues. Would have looked at whether I wanted to do other things in golf. Now, not like, you know, I'm talking, would it be commentary, would it be coaching, stuff like that. And I realized that I actually like playing golf. I like what I do. You know, all these other things, while I enjoy doing them as well, I still like the golf. Okay, the competition wasn't going so well, so I found another way of liking it, and that was to enjoy what goes on in and around the golf. And I'd say I enjoy myself on tour much more now than I would have 20 years ago, in the sense of, it was all about competing 20 years ago. Now I make sure that you know, I enjoy the venue I'm at, in terms of the cities or wherever I'm going. I'm making sure I'm enjoying myself much more than I would have, or taking in more than I would have 20 years ago. I won't say necessarily enjoying it, because obviously there was a different type of enjoyment. The competition was the enjoyment back in the day. Now the whole event. I don't think there's many people who like golf that wouldn't want to do what I do for a living, or for even a pastime.
That is a fact. It does sound like a lovely existence that you have, and that you had for such a long time. I want to try and figure out where this competitiveness came from, and how you managed to get to the top of a sport that is really, really hard to figure out, to nail, and to excel at. So I'm going to take a little bit of a trip down memory lane with you, and I'm going to start with what your earliest memory of sport is.
I'm not really sure. I think I can remember, and this is a strange one, when I was 4 years of age, helping to level the 12th green in Stacksdown Golf Club. So physically, manual labour of my little small feet. The golf course was built pretty much by hand, and on the 12th green, they got the members out, or the members and the family, whoever were there. And we actually had to pat along the green on our feet. And I was doing that at 4. Now, whether I was partaking, I can remember being involved at that. My older brothers had to pick the stones off the fairways, but less physical work. But that probably is my earliest memory. I can remember being in the garden playing football. My brothers, I had a brother about a year and a half older than me, and pretty much hung out with him when I was a kid. Which was very influential on my sport, because I thought I was a year and a half older, and I did everything at a year and a half older's pace, if you know what I mean. So I would have played football, and we would have chipped in the back garden as we got a little bit older. So a lot outside of that, in terms of of TV, of other sporting occasions, I really don't have a great younger memory of those sort of things.
You have a lot of brothers.
Yeah, 4 older brothers.
Wow, so that's always really good grounding, I think, when you're trying to.
Isn't it a huge influence? Don't they say most of the 100-meter champions in the world were the youngest of big families, and they were always trying to keep up. It certainly, and if you looked at my case, my older brothers would all have had jobs when they were teenagers. The minute they were teenagers, they would have had, lounge boy type jobs, working in different things. Whereas I never had to work. As the youngest, I got to just play my sports and didn't have to take a weekend job.
Yeah, I have 6 siblings, so I know exactly what that's like. The youngest was really like that. So who were your sporting heroes when you were growing up?
Yeah, that's interesting. I was very much a doer. I never really watched. I wasn't into watching sports so much. I was much more playing, and I played everything I could get hold of. I was outdoors playing all the time. So I would have played Gaelic and hurling as a kid. I would have played soccer. I would have played golf. I would have played anything I could get hold of. I would have been out the road playing tennis during Wimbledon. I would have been, played a bit of basketball. Whatever was available, I played. So I wasn't a great person for sitting in. And even to today, I'm not a great person for sitting and following. I'm much more of a player. So my role models when I was a kid, I was just trying to beat the person next to me. So I spent, obviously, my younger years trying to beat my older brother. The immediate older brother, and then as I got better at golf, I would have been trying to beat my oldest siblings, who were obviously a lot better than me. And then once I would have started trying to beat the guys in the club, and then people outside the golf club. So always trying to focus on people immediately around me and trying to just beat that person. And something I think it really helps in sport. I often, when I look at kids training and things like that. If you put 10 kids into a race, or 20 kids at a training ground into a race, the fastest guy's going to win, and everybody else is not going to bother trying. Or maybe the second guy might try because they know they're not going to win. But if you put 2 people into a race, so if you split them into 10 groups of 2, and the 19th slowest and the 20th slowest are in the same group, well, I guarantee you the 20th will try and beat the 19th. And I was very much like that. I picked the person who was next to me, who was next on the ladder. And I just tried to figure out, why are they better than me? And maybe beat them at their skill, knowing that I had other skills. And just, I did that all my life, very much in golf, but I definitely did it in all sports. I just gravitated to who was the best around me, and just then try. And obviously I had good role models in my older brothers and my dad, who was obviously a successful sportsman. So there was good movement in the family coming from my dad. And I can't say, my older brothers would say my dad would train them up for the sports days and things like that. But generally, my brothers trained me up for things. So if I was getting, for the sack race, put your feet in the corners and different things like that. So, look, my brothers.
You were being trained to go out for the school sports days and the technicalities of the sack race and the egg and spoon.
Of course I was, yeah. And we practiced the 3-legged race and all sorts. Yeah, we were a competitive family. But it wasn't coming from my dad at that stage, even though my brothers would say that they would have got it from my dad. It was coming from my brothers for me. My dad, parents will always tell you this, they do everything with the oldest child, if you know what I mean. And by the time it gets to the youngest is go on, get out there and do it yourself. But it was definitely an influence of my brothers on me, and especially the one just older than me. You can't overestimate having a brother 18 months older than you, who you're constantly trying to beat and compete against. Was certainly the role model for me.
I'd say as well the fact that you had such a big family and so many boys who were so active that your mum was probably just go out and play. I don't want you sitting inside watching the television. Get out from under my feet, go and play, and give me a bit of time here to do a few bits and pieces. Yeah,
look, I often look back at that with my parents, because my dad was a successful sportsman, but he was competitive to sport, but he wasn't a very competitive, he didn't push us out at all when it came to sport. What really was, there was such a contrast in that nature, because I know he was competitive, but then he lost 2 All-Ireland finals and he didn't have any regrets. It wasn't bitter about it. So he definitely was competitive, but there's definitely a real contradiction there, because I wouldn't have seen it so much. My mum was quite competitive. So, even though she wasn't the sporting one, she certainly was certainly a bit more active and had a bit more drive in that sense. As kids, though, yeah, we didn't spend any time in the house. We were outside, not necessarily throwing out, but outside.
Yeah.
Look, back in the day, you were told dinner's at 5:00.
Yeah.
Be back. And that was it. You went down to I was Ballyboat and St. Enders. We go down there and play around there, or there was always somewhere to go and play and compete and do what we want. Just have fun. So it really was a question of kids calling around and to be local kids. We go out in the field and play football across the road. There was plenty of kids my age, a little older than me actually, most of them, and we'd play all day, every day, and be back for 5:00. I think the invention of the microwave was probably the worst thing that could ever happen, that you could be late for dinner then.
Yeah, I totally get that. So at what stage then did you realise that you had some talent for sport?
I would have had a pretty big ego as a kid. I captained my school football team, Gaelic team. My last game was in Croke Park in the school's final. So I was good at. I would have thought Gaelic football was my sport. I pretty much, whatever sport I turned my hand to, I felt I was good at and competitive at. And I played, as I said, I played a lot of different sports, soccer as well on the weekend. So yeah, I thought it was good. I was a big kid as well. I was as big as anybody in my school growing up. So that that's obviously an advantage, and I was fast and all that goes with it. But what really happened to me was, at about 13, I was playing golf. I love golf. I used to play in the summer, but I started winning at golf. And when you start winning, and especially we were okay at the Gaelic, but my soccer team, so I played in 2 different teams. Especially I played for Bradford Rovers, and we used schoolboy A division, but we used to lose a lot. And I was the goalkeeper. Oh. That meant I let in a few goals. And when you're letting in a few goals on the weekend, or you're winning on the golf, which are you going to choose? So I gravitated to golf. I think I gravitated because I was good and winning. So about 13 years of age, I started to want to play golf. About 14 years of age, I started to want to not play other sports because of golf. So on the weekend, I wanted to go play a golf competition rather than a football. And that's difficult if you're the goalkeeper as well, because you can't let your team down if you're the only goalkeeper. So eventually I had to give up other sports. And, I kept playing them in school. But sort of 14, 15 years of age was when I started to drift away from club sports and play just competitive golf.
So what's that journey like back when you were embarking on it, trying to, I guess, nearly discover that there could be a career there for you? Like, you're mid-teens, you're starting to play quite a lot of it. Like, are you seeing pathways? Are you just still thinking, I'm just going to play this because I like it and I'm good?
I definitely didn't know anything about pathways. This is the 80s, and to be honest, the contrast between then and now is incredible. Like, so there was a lot of competition in golf back then, but it was local competition. So essentially, you start off, you compete in your own club and you beat the other juniors. Once you're beating them, there's other junior competitions in the local clubs. You go and play in those and you start competing. Once you start competing in that, you meet other kids, and there's some regional tournaments in Leinster, like the Wicklow boys and things like that, the Leinster boys. Once you play those, then you start entering the Connacht boys, and there's regional events around the country. And then all of a sudden you're into, if you get good enough, you're starting to play in national events, and so I got picked to play for Ireland. I would have kind of out of the blue, the under 18 Irish boys team when I was 15, off the back of a couple of good performances in that year, 1987. So it kind of was out of the blue, and nobody would have expected it. But all of a sudden at 15 years of age, I'm playing for Ireland. Now that's my sport. And I see that with a lot of sports. Most good sports people, they play the sport that is local to them and that they're good at. So like if there was a hockey club between me and the golf club, my golf club was 15 minutes from my home. There is actually a hockey club, but if my dad was a member of the hockey club, that probably would have been my sport, if you know what I mean. You pick the sport that's near you, that you can get to, that's convenient, and the one that you're winning at. And golf just happened to be that. And it did help me that, as I said, I think the winning helped, but it did help that it was within my control and it was up to me how much I did. I liked the idea of not letting in 3 goals at the weekend and getting blamed when it was actually not my fault.
Did you want to be a goalkeeper, or were you putting goals?
I was typical. I was, and this probably ended my Gaelic football career. So as I said, I would have captained my school football team and played full back. But when I played club football for Ballyboat and St. Enda's, my date of birth is the 31st of August, which is one day old. So I ended up playing club football with a team that was a year older than me, and they weren't my friends. So what did they do with the kid that they don't know? You go in goals. So once I went in goals in Gaelic football, okay, what did you do with the Gaelic footballer when you go playing soccer? You go in goals. So I ended up in goals out of just an accident. I like playing in goals. I enjoyed it, but I could see why I didn't gravitate to the sport, and maybe, I didn't, maybe didn't advance because it's not the play. There's a lot of golfers who were goalkeepers.
Really?
It would be a lot of, you talk to golfers when they talk about this, but I played in goals. Maybe because the two have some similarities, as in it's individual, it's selfish, it's the success and failure of what you do is not, whether the team, you can have a good day and the team can lose, you can have a bad day, the team can win. It's very rarely, the two aren't always linked up, and golf is kind of like that. You have to go out there and play, and it doesn't, the result doesn't necessarily, it requires a lot of mental strength to be a goalkeeper and to be a golfer. It requires a lot of, it's an individual part, and both of them are very individual, and you have to deal with those emotions. So I think, there's a lot of similarities. But golfers tend to be a little bit mad, and we know all goalkeepers are mad. So
that's actually what I was just about to ask, was that people say goalkeepers are a bit mad. You'd have to be a bit mad to go in there. So does that then transfer to golf? Yeah,
I think you don't have to be mad to start off as a goalkeeper. You have to be mad to survive as a goalkeeper. To deal with you can imagine you can be a goalkeeper, and when the team wins, the guy who scores is the one celebrating.
Mm-hmm.
The goalkeeper gets none of the glory, and he lets in a goal. It doesn't matter how well he did. If a goal goes in, it's still against his clean sheet is gone, even if it's not his fault. And it's a miserable position to be in, and you have to be so strong mentally, and sometimes so strong mentally means you have to be as mad as a hatter. To deal with the highs and lows of it, and golf is the exact same. You couldn't, it's an individual sport. You train yourself, you do your thing, and everything that happens, as much as you could do your best, is somewhat outside your own control.
Yeah, that's for sure. And just on the decision. So did you decide I'm going to, or did you face a decision where you had to give up your other sports to play golf, or did it just happen that way?
I had to give up. I very much, because you were letting down a team, especially as the goalkeeper. So I played 3 games a weekend. So I played 2 soccer games and a Gaelic football game every weekend in goals when I was like 13, 14 years of age. And if I wanted to go playing golf, that meant I let down. They didn't have replacement goal. Very few teams would have had 2 goalkeepers. So essentially, I was seriously letting down the team. So I had to make a conscious decision. No, guys, I'm not coming back next year. I'm out of this. I'm playing golf. And I liked it, but I prefer golf. So I went on my way. But it had to be a conscious decision. And I wasn't thinking I was going to be a professional golfer or anything. I just was enjoying the success I was having at golf, and wanted to do it more and more.
Yeah, it sounds like it was fun, which is important.
Oh yeah, obsessive too.
So when did that creep in, actually, or was it always there?
I think that's always been my personality. I've been quite focused, so I'd be the same as a lot of kids. If I was, I'd spend hours in the garden trying to do keepy uppies and stuff like that when I was a kid, and I'd time in the lane kicking a ball against the wall or whatever. I would go out and do stuff and keep going at it, and it never seemed like it was never worked to me or anything like that. It was always joy, but yeah, I could spend hours and hours and hours doing it, and I did. And the same with golf. My brothers would tell the story. They'd often be up at the golf course, and this when I was, maybe 14 years of age, and they'd be 18 or over, so they'd be up in the evening time playing snooker and that at the golf club late, and I'd be up there. I'd ask them to bring me up, and I'd be putting on the putting green with the light from the toilets coming out on the green, the little light coming out of this, out of the clubhouse, reflecting on the green when it's dark. I'd be there at 10 o'clock at night putting away, and that's what I did. They'd be in having fun playing snooker. I'd be outside having fun putting.
So you had talent and you had a work ethic. Which do you think kind of stood more to you as you progressed?
Work ethic, always. I'm not a great believer in this idea of talent. I believe the environment creates it. So my personality and my want and all that got me to where I was. There is talent in the sense that, there's talent in the sense of what size you're going to be and stuff like that. But it's more your environment, who even, like, I'm sure as a baby, if you, like my dad, as I said, was an athlete. So I would have been looking at an athlete from being a baby onwards and would have seen the movement. So that, that's the talent that my environment would have given me. And the drive, as I said, being the youngest of 5 boys, obviously gave that to me. You'd be always competing and fighting for your share. So yeah, I'm much bigger believer in environment. And even if there is such a thing as talent, environment and work and your work ethic will always overcome talent. Now, it would be very nice to have it easy and have beautiful movement and have a work ethic, which obviously some of the top athletes would be like that. But in general, work ethic will always overcome what people think is talent. But when you look back at talent, it's the likelihood is they put the effort in, the work in. But there's no doubt there are kids, as I said, who have beautiful movement at a young age, and you'd have to look back. Why is that? But who knows what their environment led them to that.
Yeah. And then what about when you were developing as an athlete, like when you were heading towards late teens? What did you work at the most when you were practicing and when you were trying to improve?
So I never had any formal coaching as a kid. I think my first lesson was when I was 15. I would have went to Washi Sullivan, who's the local pro in a golf club beside me, the Grange Golf Club. And then I would have, at 15, once I made the international team, I got into the national panel, and I would have got a couple of lessons there. So, but there was no coaching in my background, really. I got a lot of, I suppose, learning by watching from my dad particularly, and from my brothers, in terms of get the job done. And there was more of a focus on that in our house than anything else. So, when it came to golf, it was what you scored, not how you scored. So we didn't talk about, well, you got to hit the golf ball well, or you got to swing the club well, or anything like that. It was what did you score at that hole, and we don't care how you got it done. As in, if you missed the green and chipped and put it, or chipped it in, well, that's just as good as hitting it on the green and holding the putt. And I think so. I was learning from watching and learning from my my peers around me much more so than I was from a formal sort of coaching system or any elite coaching system. And to be honest, that's a kind of legacy that I've kind of stuck with. That I spent a lot of my professional career trying to search for the stuff I feel I didn't have as a kid or as a teenager. I wanted to become better at swinging the golf club and better at the ball striking end of things, where I always felt I had the competitive. So I've always had that knack for being able to win and figuring it out, but I've never had I've never felt like I've had the beauty and simplicity of being like we won't use the word talented, but I've always felt that bit has come hard to me.
Do you, looking back now, wish that you'd had some formal coaching when you were younger?
I'd be different. I don't know if that would be a good or a bad thing. I'd be a different person. Like my strengths have always been kind of hidden in some, not hidden, but there wouldn't be this, like, people, when you go watch golf or any sport, you generally only see what's on the surface. So you see the movement and you go, well, that person moves well, that looks good. But often, to be successful in sport, it's what's behind the movement, the drive, the thinking, the ability to overcome failure, all deal with fear, the stress, all those sort of things. That's what I have. I have the hidden talents that you don't necessarily see on the surface. And yeah, I grew up in a golf course that was very tricky and very windy and no practice ground. So you're not going to develop a beautiful golf swing in those conditions. You're going to develop, if you become good, you're going to be good because you're good at thinking your way around the golf course. You're good with your short game. You're resilient. If you grew up in Arizona, at altitude, perfect weather, you'd have a beautiful golf swing. You'd hit the golf ball a long way, but you wouldn't be very resilient. You wouldn't have the ability to figure it out when it goes wrong. So there's always we love having this conversation. I love having it going around the world. Where would be the best conditions to learn to play golf? Where would you want to come from? Warm, sunny weather would definitely help when it comes to swinging the golf club well. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that, and nearly every golfer, pretty much every golfer is definitely is a product of their environment in terms of how they play the game. Like if you watch all the South Africans, nearly like 99% of South Africans come out, hit the golf ball miles because they play a lot in warm weather or altitude. And it's easy to hit the golf ball a long way. You get up in the morning, it's warm, your muscles feel good, you can hit it through the air. You didn't want to hit the golf ball in the air a long time in Ireland, because if you put the ball up in the air for a long time, it's going to get blown into the rubbish. So you had to keep the ball down, and so it wasn't worth your while being a good swinger and striker of the golf ball in Ireland. It was much better off, having that control. So that's a great thing about golf. It's catch-22. What environment develops the best golfer? But the reality is, your environment dictates your personality as a golfer, and mine very much was dictated by Stacksdown Golf.
Have you come to a conclusion to where would be the best place to develop and grow as a golfer?
I think you're looking at a warm, windy climate. So warm is definitely a big help for golf. Windy, it requires you to be a good ball striker, but also requires you to be able to get up and down and struggle. So warm, somewhere like Buenos Aires, somewhere like that. Argentina is a pretty. Yes, it could Spain could be quite good in places, if you go coastal or whatever. But definitely, warm is a big help when it comes to hitting the golf balls. Cold weather does not, putting rainwear on does not help, but it does help with your mind. So what happens is, you tend to find with Irish golfers, we tend to be very good mentally because we're used to being resilient, being out there. Probably we've had a few really good swingers over the years, but Rory obviously is a good swinger of the golf ball and hits it well. Golf club, I think you'd have to go. I'm trying not to go through. I'm going to forget people if I start naming, but somebody like Christian O'Connor Senior, you go back, was a great swinger of the golf club. But in general, Irish players have been much more doers than would be better. That we haven't been better competitors maybe than our swing alludes to. You look at somebody like a Eamon Darcy or something who was a great ball striker but not a great swinger. plenty of guys like that who could play the game. We're a resilient lot, but we're not necessarily the most orthodox when it comes to swinging a golf club.
So at what stage, or was there ever a moment where you thought, okay, I can make it, I can go on to be top class, to be one of the best, to mix it with the best in the world?
I'd say I was probably about 36 before I had that realization. So when I was 18, I was like all kids, had no idea what I wanted to do. I had a brother who was an accountant, and he actually brought me down and enrolled me in Rathmines Technical College to do accountancy at night. And I studied accountancy with the idea that I was going to get into the golf industry, maybe as a golf resort manager, something like that. So I was never going to be a professional golfer at 18 years of age. By the time I got to about 2021, and this is so late now when it comes to golf, and it's so late in sport, but so late in golf now as well. I was beating all the guys at my level. I'd never lost a singles match in the home internationals. I was beating everybody, and these guys were turning pro. I'm not talking in Ireland. I'm talking Great Britain and Ireland. I was out there beating these guys, and these were the best, and these were the guys turning pro. And I was going, well, if they think they're good enough to turn pro, maybe I should have a go at this. So I turned pro when I was 24 on the back of I was beating the other amateurs. So I was, I felt I was the best of the amateurs at that stage. But my expectations of being a pro was very much, I was going to be a journeyman pro. So if I spent 5 years on the European Tour, finishing 50th to 100, I would have considered that a success. But I didn't realize when I went out there, I just played very much like what I did as an amateur. I just played with blinkers, kept my head down and just played. And every time I went out, I did better than I would have expected or predicted, because, I had an awful lot of fear that I wasn't good enough. And so I just go out there and just keep doing my thing over and over and over. And I won after 10 weeks. And I would say for 2 years, I described it, for 2 years, I never drew breath. I just kept going. Never, ever, ever stopped and thought about it. I just kept going. I'd say 2 years without drawing a breath. And I'd say I went a good 12 years before I woke up, especially after the winter break, without the fear that it was all going to go away. So at all stages for my first dozen years on tour, I would have got up certainly every winter when you come out to a new year and wonder, was it all going to be taken away? Is this all going to, is it all going to be gone? And that fear, and I know people say you shouldn't play with fear, but fear can be a great motivator, and it certainly worked for me. I never believed I was good enough, and that drove me along. And I would say I was a better player in that situation than somebody who when you don't have that fear, you relax somewhat, and it's not the same. But that kept me motivated. The fact I just didn't think I was good enough, so I just kept doing my thing.
So was it only winning majors that abated that fear, or was there other big events that you thought, okay, I belong here?
It was even after winning majors. So I turned pro. My first year was 96. So I say it does correspond to about 2008. Yeah, maybe it was in and around after that I realized that whatever is going to happen, I'm still going to be a pro. I'm still going to be competitive. I'm still going to win tournaments. It's not going to go. It's not black and white. It's not just going to disappear. But it took a long time. It was definitely 12 years or so, or close to that, maybe 14 years, where I would have lost that fear of it all disappearing tomorrow. That that maybe it was not a dream, but whatever I was doing, that it was just going to go away, and I wouldn't be as competitive. And certainly it's a great way to be. And I tell all the young golfers turning pro that they need to spend, I reckon, 2 years, maybe just because I did 2 years, where they change nothing in their own game, that they play their own game so selfishly for 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, they can then judge where they stand against their peers. Whereas what happens a lot is people go into a new sport or into a new level. Maybe it doesn't work out the first couple of weeks or whatever, and they start thinking they're not good enough and start changing. But they're changing too early. Everybody needs to establish where they're at. And the only way to do that is give it a decent run of doing your own thing, never changing. And then at the end of that, you'll be able to go, well, you know what? I'm not good enough, or I need to change this, or I am good enough and I might need to do this a little bit. But it takes a good while. And in golf, we're seeing this an awful lot. We're seeing a lot of good players coming out on tour, really talented. And when you come out on tour, you're in a very big pool and they get lost quickly. And then they start scrambling and changing and they lose their confidence then after that. And all of a sudden, once that happens, they're never coming back. Whereas if they go out with and when we're looking at who's going to be good, we look for somebody who's a little bit of an individual, who's always been fighting the system a bit, because they're more likely to do their own thing, be a bit resilient. And after a while, they'll establish where they stand in the game. And once you have that picture of it, you can establish what you need to do. Whereas a lot of people change too quickly, too early, and start thinking that, they need to do more. Whereas they need to find out who they are, first of all.
So with that in mind, I'm going to move it on to setbacks. Everybody has them. Sports people, athletes, particularly they get hit hard by them, because often it can derail what they want to do. What for you has been the biggest setback that you've had to overcome?
I didn't have any. So, as an amateur, things went well. When I went pro for the first 2 years, I couldn't have dreamed of having the start I had. After 2 years, I changed coach because I felt I needed to move on. I've started working with Bob Tarn. So my performances for a year would have gone backwards, but not an issue. That was something I consciously did. So there was no loss of confidence in it. And it was only about a year, and then it came back strong. I would have started winning again. And I would have won. I had a lot of second places in my career. I think, I had 29 in a period up to about 2000, and up to when I won the majors, I had 29 second places. And people used to think, that I was kind of always going to be the bridesmaid, but I was winning as well. I'd won about a dozen events in that period too, so it wasn't so bad. I think, there wasn't, after I won my majors, I played better the following years without winning. And it wasn't maybe until 2013 that my game went a bit south. I started putting badly. Got the yips on the greens, which is, if anybody's into golf will know that's no fun. And it's been a bit of a struggle since then. And maybe in the last couple of years, I've kind of just changed my outlook to what I'm looking for in golf, how I'm in the difference. I'm enjoying it more, and that's helping me be out there rather than, beating myself up, which you probably, when you're struggling, you do tend to just get down to yourself and fight harder and work harder. Now, I know I'm going to work hard. I know I'm going to put the effort and put the fight in. So I actually have to tell myself to chill out a bit and relax and not stress. But there wasn't really. I've had some injuries, but nothing that's been a setback in my career. Nothing. I like pivotal moments in my career. I lost an Irish youths event when I was 18 years of age. So that's under 21s. I was 18 and I was 2 ahead with 3 to play and bogeyed the last 3 holes, and I was called a choker, and I cried in the car park afterwards. And I was devastated that I did. It's one thing to lose an event, but when you're winning, and you give it up, and I thought I choked, and that there could be no worse feeling if you feel like you haven't got the bottle, and so that could have been a setback, but it wasn't, because I started working with a sports psychologist. I went to Dr. Aidan Moran, who out of UCD, has since passed away, obviously, but I started working with him, so it was actually a move forward, and maybe everything. if you look at throughout my career, anything that's happened to me, I use it to change course and move on. And there's no doubt working with Dr. Aidan Moore, and then I moved on to work with Bob Rotella, who's probably the main guy in golf sports psychology. And all these things drove me forward to where I am, or drove me forward to at least winning those majors and on. And yeah, nothing derails me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I've done a few of these now, and you're the first person that has not seen something that could have been a setback as a setback, that has just driven on from that. So it's quite interesting to hear that. It's just a different mindset. So who do you think then has had the biggest impact on your career?
I've had a lot of influences. No doubt my family, brothers, dad, mum, no doubt about that. Mainly influenced by people I could see. So if I was in the club, I'd want to beat the guy who was better than me. And once I was beating him, I wanted to beat the guy in the next club who was better than me. And once I was in the region, I wanted to be the best in the region and beat that guy. So I looked, Bobby Kinsella was the best player, 15-year-old, when I was 15, and he was a better iron player. So I wanted to become a better iron player so that I could beat him, that sort of way. So I liked pulling apart other people and seeing what made them tick, why they were good, and then try and beat them at their own game. So if you and me went for a game of table tennis, if you were way better than me, I'd have no interest playing you in table tennis. If you were way worse than me, I'd have no interest in playing you in table tennis. I'd practice against you. But if you were slightly better than me, especially if you were better than me, I'd be really interested in playing. And I'd play table tennis against you until I could beat you. I would go and practice until I could figure out a way of beating you. If you're marginally better. If you're way better, I have no interest, because I don't think I can bridge that gap. But if you're a little better, I'm just looking, how can I beat you? And I'd have no interest if I was better than you. If I was already better than you, I wouldn't be competitive. I'd have no interest. I'd practice. But if you were a little bit better than me, or if you, especially if you told me table tennis was your sport, that I really want to beat you. And that would be the same if we went and played tiddlywinks. If you told me you were good at tiddlywinks, I'd want to see how good you are. And if I thought I had a chance, if I didn't think I'd have a chance, I wouldn't bother playing. I'd be knowing, or I might try and learn from you. But if I thought I had a chance of beating you, I'd give it 100%.
When you were moving up through the ranks then, were you looking at people that were a little bit ahead of you and almost picking them off?
Exactly. Always, that was always my way of doing it. Why were you better than me? And I'd look at everybody like that. Why is that person better? What did they do that's better than me? And so if they're better, say if they're better at hitting an iron than I am, but I'm better at chipping, all I have to do is match them at hitting an iron, and my chipping's going to be better than theirs, so I win. So it was always just trying to copy their strengths, knowing that my strengths then would beat them on the other side. So it's just, and I'd be very, and everything I do, I'd be very much like that. I'd be looking at the person beside me and not trying, I'd be no interest in watching some guy on TV, because that's not real to me. And I think that made an influence later on in my career, because Michael Campbell won the US Open 2003, 2004. He won the US Open. I played a lot of golf with Michael Campbell, and that made winning a major very real to me, because I knew what Michael Campbell, how he played golf. I knew how he played on his good days. I knew how he played his bad days. And that made it very tangible that, look, this is what it takes to win a major. And that was the way I ran the whole of my life. Had to be what was very accessible, what I could see. And I would automatically work around it and learn from that, and do whatever it takes to beat the person beside me.
What was the sweetest one? I was going to ask you what was your greatest success, but what was the sweetest moment for you, like that you thought, okay, maybe I can meet this person, maybe I can be better than this person? Was there somebody that you overtook almost, that you really enjoyed doing it?
You know, I know from my amateur career, I've a lot of things happened in my amateur career, but I never lost a singles match in the home internationals. So I played 6 years. So I beat the best players from Great Britain. So England, Scotland, Wales, I beat at the top order. I played 1, 2, or 3, never lower than that over the years. And I never lost a few halves. And each time I would come up against those guys were getting big press. You know, they were being put up there as big stars. You know, these were the future, and you know, these were going to go on to win majors and be pros and be successful. I used to go out there and beat them, and that really gave me tremendous pleasure and confidence. And I'd have huge fear going out that I was going to get hammered. But I always managed to come up against these guys, and I'd figure a way of competing, of winning. And that gave me huge confidence, I think. When I turned pro, again, similar fear, but winning after... look, I finished 46th in my first event, and I won £1,480. And I rang my mother and said, I cannot believe I played so badly, but I finished 46th, and they're giving the money away. That's how I felt about it. The confidence I got from just making the cut in my first event, went on, made another half dozen cuts, 3 top 10s, and then a win. And just, yeah, it just was, everything followed on. I must admit, things fell nicely in a very nice sequence. My first win is unbelievable. Winning the World Cup with Paul McGinley in '97 was just a big win for us. You know, making the Ryder Cup in '99, then going on, you know, I had nice periods where I would lose tournaments because I don't have a regret about this, but there's no doubt I spent most of my life playing and practicing for tomorrow and not for today. And I would have lost a lot of tournaments over the years, that I spent too much time working on getting ready for the future rather than staying in the moment and playing the tournament that I'm in. And there's no doubt I burnt out a lot of weeks by Sunday. But every time I needed a win, I got a win. So, you know, when things, you know, if I went 6 months or a year where I hadn't won, I'd win again, and I'd get a few wins to keep me going. And then once I got a few wins, I'd go back into the training mode again and start trying to get better and better. And then I wouldn't have won for a while and come back out and win. But it was nice sequence of events. Obviously, winning a major in 2007, my first major, was the pinnacle for me. You know, my first major was very exciting, but I messed up the 72nd hole and left something wanting. I won in 2008 the way I would have dreamed of winning, the way any kid would dream of winning if you were to write it down when you were 14 years of age, how you should win a major. Well, 2008 at Birkdale was that. I played great, swung the club great, hit great shots, everything you dream about. Golf isn't like that, but that's how that one was. It was kind of perfect. And then I won again in 2008 in the PGA Championship, which is a bit of a steal. I grabbed it, right place at the right time. Different emotions for all three. It was a pity, you know, if I was looking back, as I said, to win them all so close together, kind of put a bit, it would have been easier if I won them spaced out. You know, if you won them every 5 years, there's a lot, the amount of times people would ask me after 2008, well, you know, how come your game went after that? And I go, well, I actually played much better in 2009 than 2008. I just didn't win. And I played better I played better again in 2010. I had my best year statistically tee to green in 2012 or 13, you know, so I played great afterwards. I just didn't have the wins, and it would have been easier media wise if those things had been spread out. And a lot of times people seem to think that, you know, it all sort of stopped at that stage. But it didn't. It just, with major golf, the wins come at a period, and then, you know, it's hard to sustain that. But my golf was pretty much the same for a while. And I think by the time I got to 2013, I started putting badly. Maybe I was putting a bit too much pressure on myself. I wasn't necessarily in that place that I believed that my stuff was good enough. And I think if you want to be a sportsman, that's the only thing you've got to believe, is that your stuff is good. That's it. There's nothing else to sport. If you believe that what you do is good enough, your self-confidence will bring you along. If you're always worried that you can push yourself to get better, but you've got to trust in what you're doing.
You've answered my question about the performance that defines you. Well, I think that you have, because it's what, when you look back at the when you were a teenager and you would think of the perfect performance, was that 2008?
I think all three majors are going to be lumped together as defining me. I think because they came in such a short space of time over the 2 years, winning those three majors will be one group. As I said, there was three different emotions in them. Your first one is always the most exciting. Second was the most satisfying, and the third was just I was in the right place at the right time. But the whole, I think the three of them are put together with defining me, that I won three majors in 18 months, and or 13 months, and that will be my defining legacy in terms of golf. In terms of sport, my legacy tends to be the fact that I probably changed the face of Irish golf. In this, up to that, it wasn't believed that Irish people would go on and win golf tournaments of that magnitude, would win majors. We hadn't won one since 1957. So it really wasn't something that, like, there was 15 guys on tour when I turned pro. So there was 15 Irish pros on tour. But if you talk to any of them, and they were good players, they didn't believe they could win majors. And I think, unfortunately, this probably is coming from the legacy of Christie Senior, who was one of the finest golfers that there was in the game, and he didn't win a major. And I think that probably nobody, if you were logical and you were Irish, you would go, well, I can't hit the golf ball as well as Christie Senior, and he couldn't win a major, so I can't win a major. That I didn't have that logic. I never looked at somebody else and said, well, because they couldn't do it, I can't do it. I never looked at being Irish as Irish don't win majors. And the journalists will tell me this, that they interviewed the guys when they were leading major tournaments or in and around the lead, and none of them ever believed they could win. I didn't believe I could win, but I didn't believe I couldn't win. So I just went and did it. And I think the fact that I went out and won those majors obviously made it so much easier for guys. You'd always believe Rory believed in his own destiny, and he very much had a career that was probably outside Ireland too. So he believed in that, but certainly would have had an influence on the other Irish winners in Ireland to go on and win their majors and make it very real for them, just like Michael Campbell made it real for me.
So what's next then?
I don't know. I do hope. I know this question on legacy was coming up, and I do hope that my legacy makes it easier for all Irish sports people to believe they can achieve on the world scale. And the more success we have in the world scale, no matter who it is, whatever, and I love even though I wasn't the biggest fan as a kid growing up with sport, now I love to see Irish success around the world, because I know if we win at anything on an international stage, it means other people in Ireland believe that they can be international stars. And that's so important, that we don't get caught up in our little world, that we're meant to, we're only as good as we should be, and we can't, get out of our little box. We can achieve anything, as I said, as long as you have the right mindset, and as long as you don't limit yourself. And every Irish success is a success that, maybe our snooker successes in the 80s helped me. I don't know, seeing people achieve on a world level definitely, makes it seem real and possible. And you need that. You need your role models around you in that sense. And you need your role models to be very real. As I said, that's why I probably never had the ones. I never looked up to people necessarily on TV, because they're not real. I don't know what, it makes no sense. And And not only are they not real, you put them up there in such a pedestal, you don't believe you can be them. Whereas if it's somebody from your local community or somebody from down the road or somebody, a friend of your cousin or whatever it is, that makes it, hey, hang on a second. They grew up just like me. I can do it. And it doesn't really matter what sport it's in.
And what about, I'm listening to you now, and it's like thinking motivation, like you're so good at motivating people and hearing the motivational speaking, hearing you speak like that. You're the Ryder Cup captain now. Are you going to be bringing people in for motivation, or can you do it yourself?
Well, I hope to do some of it myself, no doubt about it. We've still talking about that side of things. I'm not sure if I'm going to bring somebody in or not. We know different captains have over the years. I know I've done quite a bit with other teams over the years, and I enjoy doing it, going in and talking. It's an interesting one. At the week of the Ryder Cup, it's not a training week. So the right time for motivation and speaking is during the off season, before you start out. It's not really a great, the night before the match, it's not the time. Yeah. The night before the match is entertainment. Keep the people, in a nice, relaxed, ready to go mood. I'm not. I'm like, I really am a fan of the motivation stuff, but it really is. Motivation is a day-to-day thing that, you do the right thing today, and unfortunately, you've got to get up tomorrow and do it again. And then the day after that. And the person who does it every day continuously is the one who will have the most success. But it's once you go down the road, you have to keep going. You can never stop. So it is a winter thing. It's a training thing, and it's getting used to it. And there is going to be some motivation from me, but I'm not necessarily, if I would be bringing, I don't want to change the players themselves. I want them to play and be themselves during the week of the tournament and not be anybody else.
Are you going to be hands-on?
I have a few things. Yeah. Again, you don't want to get, these are top class players, and they know their stuff. And you want to give them the best chance of just being themselves and playing their own game. There are a few little things that are maybe unique to the Ryder Cup that I would be encouraging the players. Very much. I have a few things up my sleeve, no doubt about it. Yeah.
I look forward to hearing and seeing them. And just one last thing before I finish up. The Irish Open is coming up very soon. It's going to be, hopefully anyway, a great event with some fans there. Are you looking forward to playing in it?
I am, yeah. Mount Juliet's a lovely course, great venue. It's always nice to be back for the Irish Open full stop. I think we're going to have 5,000 fans, and that will feel great. I know it's not the normal 35,000 or whatever, but 5,000 will be enough to give us the atmosphere we need. Hopefully we have a great week in terms of the Irish, and one of us is up there on the leaderboard, or it may be more than one of us, and we bring a bit of joy to the country if we can in these crazy times. And we're kind of all looking forward. I think all of us, and talking to the other guys, we're looking forward to having an exciting week. It's great, it's kind of great to be back, somewhat back anyway, and it feels like that. And there's a nice run on the European Tour at that stage, so hopefully it will be a great week of golf. And it's interesting, you kind of think of Mount Juliet as a sunny place, so hopefully we get the weather too and brings it out, and it would be something spectacular to watch on TV if you can't be one of those 5,000.
That's for sure. Pádraig Harrington, thanks so much for sharing your journey with us and for taking the Irish public along with you. It's been fascinating and entertaining, and it's not done yet. I hope everybody enjoyed listening and watching. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review.